Dane Brugler of The Athletic dropped an ideal 7-round mock draft for the Buccaneers. We have a question regarding one of the running back prospects in the draft, and I have a conspiracy theory that I'm going to drop on all of you, while David is going to tell me why I am insane. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. We thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I am James Yarcho, rejoined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. David Harrison. You can find my written work over at BucsNation.com, find David's over at BucsGameDay.com, and of course, you can follow along on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82.
And we thank you again for making us your first listen or your first view of the day. Bucs Nation, Dane Brugler dropped a 7-round mock draft, and we hope the Buccaneers can do something close to this. Maybe not exactly, but very, very close. Number one pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 27th overall in the 2022 NFL Draft, Devonte Wyatt, defensive tackle out of Georgia. The more we say it, the more it makes sense. The more I'm pretty sure the Buffalo Bills are going to draft him, and the Bucs are never going to get a crack at him. Number two, Trey McBride, tight end out of Colorado State with the 60th overall pick. Love that as well. The 91st overall pick goes to the offensive line, Rhyan out of UCLA. Number four, we talked about running backs extensively a lot yesterday. Isaiah Spiller, running back out of Texas A&M, is pick number 133. Pick number 248 in the 5th round because there's a trade involved. Vincent Gray, cornerback out of that team up north, number 248 overall. And then the 6th round draft pick, 261 overall, Balin Spector. That is an awesome name. Linebacker out of Clemson.
I love this mock draft. I love it a lot. And I don't even think that he didn't set out to be like, how can I give the Bucs the best possible outcome over the course of 7 rounds as humanly possible?
I think Dane Brugler is a Buccaneers fan.
Confirmed. I think it just kind of worked out that way. And David, you mentioned on yesterday's episode, you didn't like Kiper's 2-round mock because of the tight end that was sitting out there on the board in the 2nd round. Well, here, Brugler addresses that immediately, still addresses running back, still finds a versatile, big, athletic 6'2" corner all the way at the end of the 7th round. I'm not saying that he's going to come in and, immediately become a starter or anything, but you have the prototypical Bowles corner sitting there for you in the 7th round, out of a major program, out of a college football playoff contender from last year that has gone up against guys that are going to get drafted in the top 15 and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. So, he's got that experience there. I really think that, again, it doesn't have to be these exact players, but the way this fell out, this is an incredible mock. I would be super stoked for this to be the draft outcome here in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing you really look at this and you that stands out as missing, right, is probably wide receiver. But again, the team brought in Russell Gage, Tyler Johnson. I mean, if you look through the videos, I believe he was one of the players there for the offseason workout program. Scotty Miller is obviously still around. And of course, we talked about possible free agents after the draft that could still be available that the Buccaneers might be interested in. Odell Beckham Jr., you know what I mean? And I spoke my thoughts on this show about Odell Beckham Jr. joining the Buccaneers. I wrote him out for SI.com and BucsGameDay.com. So, I mean, this draft falls this way. Maybe the Bucs give OBJ a call, and maybe we see if he can't be available for the stretch run or, come in a la Antonio Brown back in the 2020 NFL season. We already know the Buccaneers can integrate a veteran wide receiver, a playmaker midway through a season and make it very successful. Why not run it back and do it again with OBJ trying to get his 2nd ring 2 years in a row?
Yeah, it really, like you said, other than the wide receiver position, it really hits on everything that the Buccaneers need. And I realize, as we get closer, Devonte Wyatt is becoming the sexier and sexier name linked to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you very well could be right. I mean, I saw a mock the other day, had him going to the Los Angeles Chargers. I've seen him go as early as 14 now. So he's starting to creep up, higher and higher in these mock drafts. And, we've known now for the past, 5-6 years that once we get into draft week and we start seeing all these mocks come out that are kind of like the final version, we're going to start seeing 4 or 5 different outlets mocking the same guy to the Buccaneers. That's going to end up being the pick because it's happened every year under Jason Light. And last year it was Jenna Lane at ESPN. It was Pewter Report. It was, I believe, Matt Miller. And I think Daniel Jeremiah. All of them ended up having Joe Tryon-Shoyinka going to the Bucs at 32 right in the last couple of days before the draft. So we'll see, but I think you're right. I'm starting to feel like Wyatt isn't going to be available for the Buccaneers, and we call this a teaser. I'm going to tell you why that doesn't matter a little bit later.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about why Isaiah Spiller, a very good pick at 133 overall, 4th round running back out of Texas A&M, but Florida's Dameon Pierce is actually the best running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this year's NFL draft class. I'm going to tell you why here in a minute, and James is going to either agree or submit to being wrong, and I'm going to do that thanks to our friends over at betonline.net, your number one source for all your betting, stats, and sports info. Find all your latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Shout out to Clayton Kershaw, who absolutely got jobbed by the Los Angeles Dodgers. Is that the right phrase? Jobbed? I think that's the right phrase.
It indeed is the correct phrasing.
But it's not a cuss word, right?
No, it's not.
Okay. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again, Bucs Nation, for making the Locked On Bucs podcast your first listen or view every single day. Now, for a big announcement starting Thursday, April 28th, tuned into Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Odyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson NFL show all week leading up to the first pick. Locked On NFL Draft Live is at the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube page. Odyssey's NFL Mock Draft is on Odyssey and Locked On NFL Draft podcast feeds. Locked On NFL Draft Live, April 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern, April 29th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, April 30th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, and Odyssey NFL Mock Draft running April 18th to the 22nd and the 25th. If you can't remember all of that, don't worry. We're going to tell you a lot between now and then, so don't worry. We got you. Dameon Pierce, Florida running back. All right, we got hit up on Twitter from Joshua Gardner, our resident Locked On Bucs listener, viewer, hopefully, and Gator fan. And he basically said, you guys said we should send in ideas. I'd love to hear your debate on why Dameon Pierce should be the back we draft, forsaking all others. Best pass blocking back in the draft, mind you. And then, of course, the host of the Locked On Gators podcast, good friend of ours and good friend of the show, Brandon Olson, wrote, I too would love to hear this. I'm sure that you would, Brandon. And I hope that both of you tuned in to my appearance on the Locked On NFL podcast this week with Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings podcast, where we talked about this. And I proclaimed that Kaiir Elam was actually cornerback number 2 in this year's class, not Derek Stingley Jr. or Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson. So, James, Dameon Pierce, tailor-made for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes or no, and why or why not?
Absolutely not, just because I want Brandon and Josh's heads to explode.
Right. So Joshua has just turned off the show and blocked both of us on Twitter. Brandon is, I guarantee you, creating a curse word latent response to what you just said. Dameon Pierce is absolutely the best running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Honestly, he may turn out to be the best running back in this entire draft class when all things are played out. Here's the problem, though, and Brandon knows this, you know this, and a lot of our listeners know this. Player success in the National Football League, by and large, has absolutely nothing to do with physical ability, has everything to do with mental ability. And some of that is maturity. Some of that is the willingness to work and study and learn and the capacity to learn. Some of that's also coaching, right? Like some of that is whether or not a coach envisions, right, uses their mind, or the general manager envisions a role for a player selected in the NFL draft that actually fits their skill set. So if you ask Dameon Pierce to go out there and be, I don't know, like your Tariq Cohen, he's going to make some plays, he's going to do some things, but he's not going to be Tariq Cohen, right? Because that's not his game. But if you go out there and ask him to be a 3-down back that can run the ball, secure the ball, catch the ball, and also pass protect, that's exactly more of a traditional running back. That's exactly what he can be. And when you look at the Buccaneers running back situation, Leonard Fournette, he's your primary guy. He can do a little bit of everything as well. But I think Dameon Pierce is a good spell guy. I think he brings a little bit of a different gear. You have Gio Bernard and then Keyshawn Vaughn. Honestly, James is kind of, I don't want to say lost, but he's kind of in a situation where he better make the best of every single rep he gets, because he may find himself on the outside looking in and the fourth running back on this depth chart.
Yeah, and obviously I'm kidding. I think Dameon Pierce would be a great fit with the Buccaneers. And look, this is, David, you and I have been doing mock drafts and covering drafts, and every year there's running backs that you and I really fall in love with as fits for the Buccaneers. And this is the first year that I can remember where there isn't one particular guy that stands out to me as like, the Bucs have got to get this guy. You know, I was that way about Clyde Edwards-Helaire or J.K. Dobbins. You know, I really loved Sony Michel for the Buccaneers. You know, there's been numerous players that I have sat there and said that they would be great fits, and I think this draft has quite a few of them. If it's Pierce, great. I think he's a great fit. If it's Haskins, I think he's a really good fit. If it's Spiller, I think he's a really good fit. There's no one guy that I'm like, this is the running back that I have to see in red and pewter on Sundays this season. And what Pierce can provide to this team is, you know, exactly what you mentioned. He can spell Leonard Fournette. There are parts of his game that can improve and can make him a more versatile back with the right coaching, which I think right now the Buccaneers have. Now, whether or not they continue to have that after this season, we have to wait and see. You know, Byron Leftwich could move on and become a head coach and start plucking pieces from the offensive side, you know, to be his coordinators and his position coaches. It's very possible. Mm-hmm. So I think as it stands right now, yeah, Pierce would be a great addition. There's room for improvement. There's the opportunity that he could be the best running back in this class, but I'm not going to be brokenhearted if he doesn't get drafted by the Buccaneers. I'm just going to be really disappointed if the Buccaneers come away without a running back that actually is able to contribute. Don't give me any more of this Jeremy McNichols stuff.
Yeah, if there's a Jeremy McNichols in this group, James, you're not going to like this. To me, it's Hassan Haskins out of Michigan. I think he's the most limited guy out of the group of running backs that we've talked about here recently. So again, you look at the list. I'll recap this for those who didn't catch yesterday's episode. You just can't remember because you'll memorize everything. Isaiah Spiller, Dameon Pierce, James Cook, Rachaad White, Hassan Haskins, Malik Davis, and Pierre Strong has not had a physical visit, but did do a Zoom conference with the Buccaneers. Those are all the running backs that the Bucs have looked for. And I think I agree with you to this sense. And this is where Joshua and Brandon are probably not going to be quite as happy with what we're saying, and other Gators fans out there as well. Yes, I like Dameon Pierce. I think he is the best all-around running back. Like looking at a holistic situation and the fit with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers themselves and what they say. I mean, remember Todd Bowles did say that they would like to probably run the ball a little bit more. I think Dameon Pierce fits the bill for what the Buccaneers are going to try to do better than any other running back in this class. But Isaiah Spiller, still a very well-rounded running back, still a very capable running back. Rachaad White, I think Rachaad White is the most Dameon Pierce-like, but a later round version, right? So obviously you're going to lose a little bit of talent and ability, I think. But I think the potential is still very good with Rachaad White. Obviously, he's an Arizona State Sun Devil, so I have some bias and a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for him. But the talent also does back up the assessment. I think James Cook, you're getting a little bit more of one side than the other. Pierre Strong, same thing. Hassan Haskins, I think you're getting more of one side than the other, but I think you're going the wrong direction. I don't think the Buccaneers want to move into a more limited pass receiver. I mean, I'm not saying he can't catch the ball, but just a little bit more of a limited type of guy than what these other options. And then Malik Davis, honestly, guys, Malik Davis, Florida Gator running back, I don't know anything about him, so I can't really tell you. I undrafted free agent, most likely maybe a 7th-round pick if they have those two picks. Of course, if Dane Brugler gets his way, they're not going to have a 7th-round pick. So Malik Davis will be a priority undrafted free agent if he doesn't sign elsewhere.
If you all want to know a non-Ohio State Buckeye approach to Hassan Haskins so that you're not getting this hatred bias. I have a draft profile of Haskins up on bucksnation.com. It dropped as you were listening to this. It dropped yesterday. If you were watching this on the live premiere, it dropped earlier today. So I seem to remember a lot of people said Ezekiel Elliott couldn't catch the ball too. It wasn't that he couldn't. It's just that he didn't get the opportunity. And
listen, I didn't say he can't catch the ball. I said I actually literally said he can catch the ball. It's just not his strong suit. I mean, look, let's look at this is going to turn into Hassan Haskins debate instead of Dameon Pierce. Let's look at Lance Zierlein, NFL.com's big runner who is much more workmanlike than dynamic with the ball in his hands. That's the first sentence. That's what I'm talking about. He's not the run the ball and burst through for 40 yards type, but that's just not his style of play.
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Right. That's all I'm saying. It's not a shot, but I don't think that's what the Buccaneers are looking for in a primary number two. I think if you get Hassan Haskins, he comes in behind Gio and Keyshawn and as a developmental guy, whereas Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Spiller, I think Rachaad White competes. I don't know that he beats Keyshawn Vaughn, but I think he competes. But I think Spiller, even Cook, and I think Dameon Pierce unseat Keyshawn Vaughn as the backup immediately.
I would say immediately, yes, but I am confident enough in Haskins' ability that he would become the primary spell guy by about midway through the season. And let me tell you, if there is a blitzing safety, a blitzing linebacker, and Haskins is the one on the field, to pick up the blitzer, that dude's going to get knocked flat on his back. Haskins is a monster when it comes to picking up the blitz. He will knock a dude out. But there are plenty of running backs that will fit for the Buccaneers. To answer your question, Josh, yes, we both love Dameon Pierce, but he is not the end all be all, 1A and everybody else starts at like H6. It's the gap is not that large, but Pierce would be a great addition to the team, but so would plenty of other running backs. David, I am going to throw a tinfoil hat theory out that I started developing earlier today, coming up in just a moment. I can't wait to hear you tell me how stupid and wrong I am. But what's not stupid and dumb are all of our listeners that have tried out the Built Puffs, because Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They are fluffy marshmallow wheat, not just a protein bar. They are a treat covered in 100% real chocolate. There are some incredible flavors like brownie batter, yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, all Built bars, the Puffs and the OGs, covered in 100% real chocolate, low calorie, high protein. You can replace your candy bars with Built bars, and you're going to be thankful that you did. Most Built bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They are going to make it delicious first, then they're going to go back and figure out how to make it healthy. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. James Yarcho, David Harrison on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs, at DHarrison82, the show at Locked On Bucs. David, you and I are both guilty of the same thing. And it goes beyond this show. It goes beyond our sports coverage. It spills over into our everyday life. And that is, you and I absolutely love to overthink things. That is just by nature what you and I do.
Oh, no, that's
and I've done it again.
Yeah, definitely.
I've done it again, and it's all your fault. I was listening as I was working on Thursday morning. I was listening to your solo episode of Locked On Bucs podcast. And you were talking about all these top 30 visits, and you were guaranteeing that the Buccaneers were going running back in some way, shape, or form based on how many people that they're bringing in. And some of these guys that they bring in, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to draft them. A lot of these top 30 visits are guys they know they can't draft, but they want to start building a profile because maybe after 5 years, these guys are going to become free agents. And you want to build up that folder. You want to build up all those things. And it got me thinking about what the Buccaneers strategy is going into this draft here in just 2 weeks. What if I told you that the Buccaneers were playing possum, so to speak, heading into the NFL draft? So earlier I had talked about how we will know 3 days before the NFL draft who the Buccaneers are taking, because everybody is going to get the same guy in their mock draft. Right now, the sexy name is Devonte Wyatt. What if I told you that as great as Dane Brugler's 7-round mock for The Athletic is, the first 2 picks that he has are guaranteed not to happen? That the Buccaneers are not going to go defensive line in the first round, and they're not going to go tight end in the second round, and they may not address either of those positions until day 3.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked numerous times about how the first pick especially, but probably the first 2 days, need to be guys that can come in and have immediate impacts.
Right.
So what if, to keep teams from knowing what they are doing, we know that Ndamukong sent out a tweet congratulating Todd Bowles on becoming a head coach. And he said, congrats to Todd Bowles on becoming head coach of a great team that still feels one man light on talent. Hint, hint. Todd Bowles talked about how their priority was to get Ndamukong re-signed and back in the building. We know from an interview that Rob Gronkowski did with SB Nation that if he comes back to play, the only team he will play for is the Buccaneers. I feel like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I got all the yarn and it's all tied all over to all the different pictures.
Yeah.
Here's my theory.
Okay.
To prevent teams from knowing what they're going to do, what direction they could be going in, to keep from telegraphing their picks, they have agreements in place with both Ndamukong and Rob Gronkowski, with the understanding amongst all 3 of them that those deals will not be announced until after the draft. They want teams thinking they're going to go defensive line early in the draft to replace Ndamukong. They want teams thinking that they're going tight end early in the draft because they only have Cameron Braid out there. They lost OJ. They don't have Gronk. They want teams who all do their own mock drafts to look at the Bucs and go, oh, well, obviously they're going to go Devonte Wyatt. Obviously they're going to go Perrion Winfrey in the second round. If they don't get Devonte Wyatt, they have to address defensive line. They have to address tight end. The heck they do. They already have their guys lined up and ready to go. They don't want to tip their hand at all.
I've actually heard that already from another person.
What?
Yeah.
I don't like that at all.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that's a thing. The only thing I say about that is that if that is the case, then Todd Bowles should not or likely would not have come out and openly said that their main priority or first priority is getting Ndamukong back on the roster, because that tells every NFL team that if Todd Bowles has his way, they're going to have Ndamukong. The other aspect to that is that even with Ndamukong on the roster and Rob Gronkowski on the roster, they still need immediate replacements either next year or in case of injury. And remember, Rob Gronkowski is a player who's often injured. He had a very healthy 2020 once he got up to NFL shape and speed, and that's beautiful. But 2021 was once again filled with injuries, which he said, as you know, is one of the reasons he's considering not coming back. It's not that he doesn't love the game or his teammates or the team. It's the injuries. He doesn't know if he wants to put himself through that again. I don't necessarily disagree that that's a possibility. I think it's definitely within the. I mean, NFL teams this time of year, they're playing so many games. It's like they'll literally burn a top 30 visit on a guy they have no intention of drafting just to try to put it on the radar of other teams that maybe they're going to draft them. I mean, the Detroit Lions, it's been talked about that maybe they could be leaking out to other people like, hey, Malik Willis might be an option number 2, because what they're actually trying to do is get a team like the Seattle Seahawks maybe to jump up to number 2 with them to get Malik Willis away from them. And they'll say, oh, you're really messing us up here, guys, taking our quarterback, but we'll let you have number 2 for some extra draft capital. Darn, you got us. You know what I mean? So it's definitely within the realm of possibility. I don't really have an opinion one way or another thinking that like it is or is not happening. I would just say that even if Gronk and Sue or either or are coming back, that tight end and D line still need to be day one or day two targets for the Buccaneers.
I could still see them being day two targets.
Yeah.
But I still believe if this in James's tinfoil hat world, if this is what's going on, you need that first round pick to be a guy who's going to set foot on the field immediately and make an immediate impact. Who that would be, I don't really know. And the only other thing that I'll say about it is, we had that quote from Bowles because he was asked about Tyrann Mathieu.
Right.
And he said, our first priority is getting Ndamukong Suh back in the building before we bring in any other outside free agents. Well, then they turned around and they brought in Keanu Neal. So maybe it wasn't really his first priority and he just didn't want to bring in
maybe his first priority and he's already got an agreement in place, like you said, and they're just not saying anything. Yeah, I mean, no, I get it. It's definitely rooted in some logical dot connecting. I just don't know if those dots actually exist or if they need to be connected. With tight end, again, tight end, I think tight end's a day two target regardless because there's no day one. Like, I don't imagine anybody drafting a tight end on day one in this class. And then
no, not at all.
Devonte Wyatt, we saw the team take Joe Tryon-Shoyinka last year at number 32, and he didn't have a huge impact, I don't think, but he did get on the field and had some time, down the stretch. Devonte Wyatt could certainly still carve out a role-playing role for himself there with the Buccaneers defensive line in his rookie season. I think, honestly, if they have an agreement with Sue and they have an agreement with Gronk in place already, I think wide receiver becomes probably your number one target. But again, what they have planned for Russell Gage or how much confidence they have in Russell Gage, they could believe in that move more than me. I don't see him as a true number 3 slam dunk, book him now type of thing. But if they do, then they'll move on from that as well. And it literally could just be one of those drafts where you're taking the best player available on your board, the way that, Jason Light did with Dirk Cutter when they thought they had something better than they actually did with OJ Howard.
Yeah, you could look at a situation where maybe they go Kaiir Elam in round 1, then you can get yourself a Perion Winfrey in round 2. Round 3, you can snag your receiver. I know a pretty good Buccaneers receiver that was drafted in round 3. Then round 4, maybe you're looking at your guy Ruckert, the tight end from Ohio State. You might have to maneuver a little bit. You might have to try to move up, or maybe you're moving down in the third round and you're picking up an additional pick, and you can use that for some leverage and you can maneuver it that way. But it definitely opens up a lot more possibilities. You could go Elam in round 1, or you could flip flop the two. You could go with a Treylon Burks who visited the Buccaneers in round 1, and then maybe your guy who I can't remember his name, the corner in round 3. You talk about him all the time. The third
McCollum out of Sam Houston.
That's the one.
Okay.
That's the one. So lots of different possibilities. I feel like, getting this close to the draft, we tend to become more and more tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And I wanted to take a moment. It's like, what? This is not out of the realm of possibility. Let's try to expand our view a little bit and take a look at some other possibilities that could end up happening now, that Devonte Wyatt could be sitting there and the Bucs pass on him and we all go, what is going on?
Yeah. And they take Matt Corral out of Ole Miss.
Stop that. Stop that right now. Goodness gracious. But yeah, then right after the draft, it's announced that Sue and Gronk are coming back. It's like, okay, that all makes sense again.
What's probably going to happen is the Bucs are going to trade Tom Brady to the Miami Dolphins for Tua Tagovailoa and 2 first-round draft picks. Why
are you trying to send us into the weekend on such a down note right now?
It's football, guys. It's supposed to be fun. Lighten up. We're good.
Happy thoughts. Hassan Haskins, happy thoughts. With that, let's go ahead and get out of here. David, we want to thank all of our listeners and our viewers for making Locked On Bucs their first listen or view of the day. Now, make your second listen, the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects, as well as NFL front offices, free and available wherever you get your podcast. We will be back on Monday. If there's anything that you want us to talk about, it will be a mock draft Monday, so you could submit your own mock draft over at lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com or give us a shout at 813-444-5841. For David Harrison, I am James Yarcho. Make sure you're checking out our written content. I am over at bucksnation.com. David over at bucksgameday.com. Follow along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, be good to one another, fire those cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.